Hello everyone, viewers. We think we know the story. The tale of the brilliant angel who fell from grace, a simple story of pride and punishment. But what if the first rebellion, the war that scarred the heavens, was far more complex? What if it wasn't born from a sudden burst of vanity, but from a slow, simmering poison of perceived betrayal? Today we go back. Back before Eden, before humanity, we are going to witness a blow. By blow account of Lucifer's cosmic rebellion, a civil war fought with light and shadow in the very heart of creation. This is the story of the war in heaven. In the timeless eternity before our world was conceived, heaven was a symphony of perfect harmony, a realm of unimaginable light, sound, and color, powered by the very presence of the Almighty, the celestial city, and among the countless beings of light that served the Creator, one shone brighter than all the rest. His name was Lucifer, the morning star, the light bringer. He was not just an angel, he was a masterpiece, forged from the purest celestial fire. His wisdom was profound, his beauty was breathtaking, and his music could make galaxies weep. He was the chief of the covering cherubs, the one who stood closest to the throne. His station was the highest, his honor the greatest. The angelic choirs followed his lead, their celestial hymns rising in glorious praise, all orchestrated by his matchless talent. He was second only to the Son of God, his closest companion, his brother in arms and spirit was Michael. Where Lucifer was the brilliant artist and statesman, Michael was the steadfast warrior, the embodiment of divine justice, and Lucifer, the visionary, Michael, the protector. Together they oversaw the heavenly host, their bond a symbol of the unity that defined the celestial realm. There was no jealousy, no rivalry, there was only love, purpose, and the shared glory of serving the infinite. Lucifer did not just serve, he loved. He loved the Father with an intensity that burned as brightly as his own form. He understood the intricate laws that held the cosmos together because he had stood by the architect as they were laid. His pride in the beginning was not a sin. It was a deep, abiding satisfaction in his own perfection, a perfection he viewed as the ultimate tribute to the one who had made him. He saw himself as the flawless mirror reflecting the Father's glory. And for a long, immeasurable age, this reflection was pure. A new creation was proposed, one that would ripple through the fabric of heaven and forever alter the course of history. The Father declared his intention to create a new order of beings. Beings not of pure spirit and light, but of dust and breath. They would be called man, and they would be made in the very image and likeness of God himself. A profound and unprecedented honor. The angels listened, and these new beings, would be given dominion over it. At first, Lucifer was intrigued, another facet of the Father's infinite creativity to marvel at. He imagined these humans as perhaps simple, beautiful creatures, another part of the grand cosmic orchestra he helped conduct. But then came the decree that struck him like a thunderbolt, shaking the very foundations of his being. The Father announced that his own Son would, and because of this, all of heaven, every angel, every cherub, every seraph, would be called to honor them, to serve them, to guide and protect this fragile, new creation for a moment. A silence fell over the great angelic assembly. A silence so deep it was almost a sound. The command was clear, the perfect were to serve the yet unmade. The flawed Lucifer stood, bathed in the light of the throne, and for serve them beings of clay. We are of spirit and fire. We have beheld the face of God. These humans will be lesser, weaker, prone to error. The thought was a spark in a forest of dry timber. He looked at Michael, expecting to see the same confusion, the same questioning in his brother's eyes. But Michael's gaze was fixed on the throne, his expression one of unquestioning acceptance. Lucifer's was conditional, and that condition had just been violated. The seed of rebellion was not pride in its simple form, but a wounded love, a sense of betrayal. He felt that the Father was lavishing an unearned honor upon a lesser race, while diminishing the status of his firstborn sons of light. Has the Father forgotten us? He thought. The question, a venomous whisper in his soul, has he forgotten our eons of... But the perfect harmony within him was broken. A single discordant note had been struck, and its vibrations began to spread. He started subtly, not with open defiance, but with carefully chosen questions posed to his fellow angels in the quiet moments, away from the direct light of the throne. He would approach a group of seraphim, his expression one of troubled sincerity. "Brothers, have you considered the full weight of this new command?" He presented his concerns not as rebellion, but as a search for clarity. For truth, he was Lucifer, the light-bringer. Seeking truth was his nature. He was charismatic, persuasive, and deeply respected. Angels who had followed his lead for millennia were inclined to listen. He spoke of love for them, for their angelic order. "I fear for our future," he would confide in another, his voice, "Are we to become mere guardians for his new pets?" He twisted the Father's plan for love into a narrative of replacement and neglect. He painted a picture of a fickle God and of angels being cast aside for a new favorite. To many who had known nothing but perfect order, this new, uncertain future felt threatening. Lucifer offered them an explanation for their anxiety, an enemy to blame God's unfair decree. His primary task, he was their brilliant commander, their shining example. He gathered them in the far reaches of the celestial plains, under the light of stars he himself had named. There his whispers grew bolder. "The Father's law is not absolute if it is not just," he argued. "And this is not justice. It is an arbitrary whim. True loyalty is not blind obedience. True loyalty is to the principles of fairness and reason. The Son, I say, no created being should command our worship, only the Father." It was a masterstroke of manipulation, couching his own rising ambition in the language of piety and reason. He created a faction, a third of the heavenly host, swayed by his logic, his beauty, and the sheer force of his will, began to rally to his side. They saw him not as a traitor, but as a reformer, a champion for their rights. Michael watched this schism grow with a heavy heart. He approached Lucifer, not as a general, but as a brother. "Lucifer, what are you doing? You are sowing discord in the courts of God. Cease this madness. Go to the Father. Ask for forgiveness." Lucifer turned to him. His eyes, once pools of pure starlight, now held a cold, hard fire. "Forgiveness for what, Michael? For speaking the truth, for a heaven governed by merit, not by decree. A heaven where we are masters of our own destiny." The chasm between them was now unbridgeable. Michael saw blasphemy. Lucifer saw liberation. The lines were drawn. Heaven, the realm of perfect peace, was now a celestial kingdom on the brink of civil war. Before the first blow was struck, there was a final solemn confrontation, a grand assembly. On one side stood Michael and the loyal two-thirds of the angelic host, their forms radiating a grim, resolute light. On the other stood Lucifer, magnificent and defiant, flanked by his legions. Their light was different now, harsher, tinged with the red fire of ambition and the cold silver of intellectual pride. The Father's voice, which was not a sound but a feeling that resonated in every being, "Iniquity is found in you." Lucifer stepped forward, his presence so commanding it momentarily silenced the cosmos. He did not bow. He addressed the throne as an equal. "I have done nothing but seek the truth you instilled in me," he proclaimed, his voice a torrent of perfect, chilling logic. "You created me to be perfect, wise, and beautiful. You gave me a will of my own. Now you ask me to subjugate that will to a being of... It is you who has introduced imbalance. I seek only to restore the meritocracy of heaven. I will not bow, we will not serve." His speech was a declaration of independence, a cosmic manifesto of self-exaltation. He was claiming his own godhood, his own authority to determine right and wrong. The choice was made. The argument was over. The time for war was at hand. He unsheathed a sword that seemed forged from a captured star, its light a searing white. "Who is like God?" he roared, his voice the sound of 1,000 thunders. It was not a question but a battle cry, the very meaning of his name. "There is none like God." The loyalist angels echoed the cry, their voices a tidal wave of sound that shook the foundations of heaven. Lucifer, in response, let out a laugh, a sound of pure, arrogant defiance, and drew his own weapon, a spear of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the light around it. The war in heaven had begun. The first moments of the battle were pure chaos, an explosion of light and sound that would have vaporized galaxies. It wasn't a war of steel and flesh, but of will and essence. Loyal angels, crying Michael's name, clashed with the rebels. Hymns of praise turned into war cries, beams of pure creation energy, wielded by Michael's forces, met blasts of raw, focused ambition from Lucifer's legions. Comets were hurled like spears, their fiery tails scorching the celestial skies. Nebulae were torn asunder, their stardust scattered. Entire constellations were snuffed out in the crossfire. The golden streets of the celestial city cracked under the strain of a conflict they were never meant to witness. Lucifer was a terrifying whirlwind of destruction. He moved faster than thought, his obsidian spear a blur of darkness that extinguished any light it touched. He was the morning star, the most powerful created. His generals, mighty angels who had once been paragons of virtue, Beelzebub, the lord of the high places, Azazel, the standard-bearer, Leviathan, the great serpent of the celestial oceans, wreaked their own havoc. They knew heaven's strengths, its secret pathways, its energy flows. They used this intimate knowledge to wage a devastatingly effective campaign for the rebels, fueled by the intoxicating promise of freedom and self-rule, fought with a ferocity that stunned the loyalists. If you find this account of the First Cosmic War captivating, and you want to explore more epic stories from mythology and scripture, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us bring these timeless tales to life. Now, let's return to the two brightest stars in the heavenly firmament, now locked in a collision course. Michael and Lucifer met in the skies above the sea of glass. The clash of their weapons sent reality shuddering. It was a duel of titans, brother against brother. Why, Lucifer? Why have you brought this ruin upon our home? Michael demanded, parrying a thrust that could have shattered a moon. His movements were... Lucifer sneered, his face a mask of beautiful, terrible fury. This was a cage, a gilded cage where we were expected to sing for our supper and bow to a lesser species. I fight for our freedom, Michael, something your chained mind can no longer comprehend. Their duel was a microcosm of the entire war. Michael's light was pure, steady, and unyielding, the light of faith. Lucifer's was a dazzling, chaotic, and seductive fire, the light of the self they had trained together, fought side by side against cosmic horrors for eons. They knew each other's every move, every thought. But now that intimacy was turned into a weapon, Lucifer was faster, more creative in his attacks, his fighting style a brilliant, unpredictable dance of death. Michael was stronger, his defensive. You speak of freedom, but you offer only anarchy. Michael countered, his sword clashing against Lucifer's spear, sending out a shockwave that rippled across heaven. You speak of truth, but your words are woven from the lies of your own ego. You were loved, brother. You were honored above all others. Love, honor. Lucifer's voice dripped with scorn. They were chains to keep me in my place. We don't need to serve. We were born to rule. It was then that the final veil of his deception fell away. This wasn't about humanity. It was never truly about humanity. That was just the catalyst. This was about his own unquenchable thirst for the throne. He didn't want to be fate like God. He wanted to be God. He wanted to be God. That blasphemous declaration was the turning point. As his form began to glow with an intensity that outshone Lucifer's own brilliant light. The name he had cried at the start of the battle, who is like God, now became his very essence. It was the ultimate truth of the universe, and that truth was now his weapon. Lucifer, for the first time, felt a flicker of something he had never known. Fear, the raw primal power of the Creator, channeled through his brother, it was no longer just a weapon of light. It was an instrument of absolute judgment. For your pride and your blasphemy, you are cast out, he declared, his voice now imbued with the authority of the divine judge. He brought the sword down. It wasn't a blow of anger, but of sorrowful, terrible necessity. The impact didn't wound Lucifer's body. It shattered his connection to the divine source. A scream of pure agony and shock tore from Lucifer's throat as his own light began to flicker, to corrupt. His beauty began to twist, his form contorting in on itself, warped by the iniquity that had consumed him. The morning star was extinguished. That single blow broke the morale of the rebel army, seeing their magnificent leader defeated, his light failing. They faltered, Their strength, the loyalist angels, galvanized by Michael's victory, pressed their advantage. The war became a rout. The rebels were driven back past the jasper walls, past the gates of pearl, to the very edge of heaven's ramparts. There was no more fighting. There was only the great, terrible expulsion. One by one, legion by legion, the fallen were cast down. A third of the stars of heaven were swept from their orbits. He was not merely pushed over the edge. He was hurled downward by Michael's own hand, his brother's face a mask of grim duty and profound sorrow. As he fell, he watched the light of heaven, his home, his birthright, shrink into a tiny, impossibly distant star. He fell through the void, through the unformed darkness outside of creation. And as he fell, his rage, his sorrow, his pride, and his immortal hell was born around him. A realm of shadow and fire, a perfect inversion of the heaven he had lost, a kingdom of ashes built on the memory of light. The light bringer had become the prince of darkness. The morning star had become Satan, the adversary back in heaven. The war was over. But there was no celebration. The celestial realm was scarred, wounded. The music that returned was not triumphant. The silence left by the departed was a wound that would never fully heal. A great sadness settled over the victors. They had preserved the throne, but they had lost a part of themselves. Michael stood on the battlements, looking down into the darkness where his brother had fallen. The light of his sword now dimmed, his face etched with an eternal grief. The price of loyalty had been devastatingly high. The war in Lucifer, now Satan, his heart consumed by a hatred for the God who had defeated him and the humanity he blamed for his fall, turned his gaze to the new fragile world Earth, the Garden of Eden. He had lost the war for heaven, but he would now wage a new war for the souls of God's beloved new creation. The battle lines had been redrawn, and humanity now stood unknowingly in the very center of This ancient epic story is more than just a myth about angels. It is a profound allegory for the war that rages within each of us. Lucifer's fall began with a single tiny seed of resentment, a feeling of being undervalued, a question about fairness. He allowed that seed to be watered by pride and nurtured by ego until it grew into a monstrous tree of rebellion that tore his world apart. How often do we allow we can be like Lucifer, focusing on what we believe we are owed, allowing our ambition to curdle into a poison that isolates us and casts us into our own self, made hell of anger and resentment. Or we can be like Michael, choosing loyalty, choosing faith, choosing to serve a purpose higher than our own ego. His strength wasn't his own. It came from his connection to the divine, his cry of, "Who is like God?" The story of the war in heaven teaches us that our greatest battles are not fought against external enemies, but against the shadow of Lucifer within ourselves. It is a constant choice between the pride that demands to be the center of the universe and the humility that finds true strength and peace in serving the light. All right, that is all for today's video. We've journeyed through the triumph and tragedy of heaven's first and only war. It truly helps the channel continue to explore these profound and epic stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.